and Andy Staples of Sports Illustrated, kind enough to join us here on the show. How are you, Andy?
I'm good, Rich. I listened to that impassioned plea for the Big Ten, and I say this as a graduate of a school in the mighty SEC.
Okay.
That the best conference in America is the ACC.
The ACC.
Yeah. Now they're the most stacked at the top, and they've got some good middle. The Big Ten, the middle's getting better, but it's not quite as good in the middle. And obviously, the top of the Big Ten is very, very good. So, but yeah, if you had to pick which two leagues might produce two playoff participants, the ACC and the Big Ten would be the two you'd pick.
Well, ACC would be obviously Clemson, and you still choose Florida State despite the fact that Francois is done for the year?
I don't know that it goes Florida State, although I will say that defense will keep them in almost every game. You know, anybody who tells you they know what is going to happen with James Blackman as their starting quarterback is lying to you. The guy got to campus 2 months ago. Nobody knows. You know, the players all praised him pretty lavishly. Jimbo Fisher says he's ready, but you know, I got to figure out, is that something that you have to say to talk yourself into it at this point, or is he really that ready? Because, you know, this is a year where a bunch of true freshman quarterbacks, it seems like, have to be ready. You know, Kasim Hill at Maryland comes in and saves them against Texas. Jake Fromm's going to start for Georgia against Notre Dame. It's a crazy year like that. But so I would say Clemson, maybe Florida State, but also maybe Louisville, also maybe Miami, also maybe Virginia Tech. The ACC's got some very good teams.
Well, I mean, I didn't even mention Maryland beating Texas, by the way, when I was talking about the Big Ten.
Oh, yeah.
And so who else in the ACC? I mean, top to bottom, would you say can pound the table for the conference compared to the Big Ten and the SEC, Andy?
Well, the SEC is not in that conversation yet. Auburn and LSU need to do some stuff, or Georgia or Florida or something. Well, Florida we saw last week, maybe not. But Auburn, LSU, Georgia need to do some stuff to get the SEC even in that conversation, because at this point it's Alabama and everybody else, and has been for a little while. But the ACC, you know, NC State did lose to South Carolina, but they are still loaded on the defensive line. It was a game they statistically dominated, but South Carolina has a quarterback, and having a quarterback will change things for you. But Miami's one that I'd pay attention to. We will see what happens when they go into Tallahassee next week. If they can finally break that losing streak against Florida State, I think that means Miami's ready to compete.
Andy Staples of Sports Illustrated here in the DirecTV 4K College Football Report. How much smoke is there in Texas A&M with Kevin Sumlin after that 44-10 blown lead, and a regent taking to Facebook to vent like he is an old man on the porch telling the kids to get off the lawn? Andy?
That is a very Texas A&M thing to have happen. It's one of those. I had somebody in the business call me who works at a different school and say, should I have a conversation with my regents about not posting things to social media? No, you don't need to, because your regents will know better. But at Texas A&M, that's the sort of thing that happens. You know, the AD went on Paul Feinbaum's show in May on the SEC Network and said 8-5 isn't going to cut it. They have to win and win now. They have to be better. I think if you wanted to put a magic number on the season for will Kevin Sumlin keep his job, I think it would be 5-3 in SEC play. Because the attitude of Texas A&M is, we didn't pay all this money to expand the stadium. We didn't pay all this money for these beautiful facilities to be average in the SEC, to be 4-4 every single year. So I think if he could be over 500 in SEC play, that would probably do the trick. The problem is, I'm not sure I see the wins on the schedule, because I don't know that UCLA's comeback was a sign that UCLA is some juggernaut. The way they pushed UCLA around in the first half suggests to me that UCLA is okay, but I don't know. So that doesn't suggest to me that Texas A&M can beat Alabama or LSU or Auburn. I mean, and the thing is, if you lose to all three of those, you can't lose another SEC game. And because probably he's gone if you do.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of Ohio State, or the Ohio State taking on Oklahoma this weekend? What do you think of that one?
I am definitely going to pick the Buckeyes in that game. I just think what they have on their defensive line is just ferocious. I mean, when I can name all four of your defensive ends, even the two guys who rotate in as well, That means you are deep. And then I think that Kevin Wilson toward the end of that Indiana game kind of figured out his play calling mojo, because I mean this is the first time he's calling plays for JT Barrett, and it looked like he had to kind of feel his way around a little bit and then figured out what worked. And I've been screaming about this since a couple years ago. It felt like the two guys that were running the offense at Ohio State between Tom Herman and now just forgot that JT Barrett is really good at throwing the ball to a guy about 8 yards down the field who has some space around him and letting that guy run all day.
Did you hear what I had to say about that the other day, Andy? I'm not suggesting that you listen or watch this show every day. I said the same exact thing.
Oh, did you? No, I didn't. I'm glad I'm not crazy. I'm glad everybody else sees it too. I mean, it's nuts. He's not good at throwing the ball down the field. That's not his strength. But he's a very good decision maker when you give him some options. And that the drag to Paris Campbell that he caught it 8 yards from the line of scrimmage and then ran all day, that should be their signature play, because JT Barrett is devastating in the read option run game. And that the freshman they got, J.K. Dobbins, holy cow. So you got that. You're going to make the defense sweat with that. And then if you add in the fact that he can pull that ball and hit, one of three different targets 6 to 15 yards down the field, I don't know how you stop him.
Andy Staples of Sports Illustrated. A couple more minutes with him on the DirecTV 4K College Football Report. Give me an upset for Week 2, one that we're not talking about, that's not on that radar screen right now. What do you think?
Ooh, it's tough to find an upset. I was looking through the matchups, because the games where somebody really highly ranked is playing somebody, they're playing somebody good, or they're playing somebody that has no chance.
Well, what about Pittsburgh against Penn State? What about that battle?
I don't think Pittsburgh's going to beat Penn State.
Okay.
I think Penn State's fans are laughing at Pitt because Pitt went to overtime with Youngstown State, which Pitt broke my rule of never, ever, ever schedule a good FCS team because there's nothing in it for you. But I don't think the Penn State players will underestimate Pitt, because this is a Pitt team that beat them last year.
Well, if Western Michigan's at Michigan State after Western gave USC quite the scare, and then you've got USC against Stanford. I mean, Stanford just...
Okay, I will give you that as an upset, because I don't think it's an upset. So somebody told me the line of that USC-Stanford game last night.
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow. It's like USC by 6 or something. Stanford has had their number the last 3 years. They're a bad matchup for USC. I just can't imagine thinking, maybe USC wins that game, but thinking that they can beat Stanford by a touchdown and making that the line, that seems crazy given recent history.
Mm-hmm. So I guess you can't. I mean, Stanford is an upset. That's.
I'm taking Stanford in that game. The reason I didn't say that, right off the bat, is it wouldn't feel like an upset.
Right. Well, I mean, Stanford has the ability to get better and better and better, and even put its name in the national championship ring by the end of the year. You never know in the Pac-12. All right. So when it all comes down to it, you think Ohio State handles business and Penn State handles business. So you're saying basically what we're looking at, the top 10 as it currently stands right now, Stanford might beat USC and take that apart, but otherwise we're kind of dormy between right now and the end of the weekend, correct?
Curious about Auburn-Clemson.
Okay.
Really curious about Auburn-Clemson, because Auburn's offense is better with Jarrett Stidham running it. Now, we haven't seen it at full strength yet because Cameron Petway didn't play last week, and they didn't really need much help against Georgia Southern. The thing I've been curious about with Auburn is, will their defense be as good as it was last year? Because that defense kept them in a lot of games last year, and while the offense was just abominable in some of those games. Now, they had a nice run in the middle there. But the offense should be very good this year. If the defense is as good as it was last year, it doesn't even need to be better, just as good, you're talking about a team that can beat anybody. So I'm curious to see how Clemson, with Kelly Bryant, facing his first big-time opponent, how do they handle that? Now, I'm of the mind that Clemson recruits and reloads about the same way Alabama and Ohio State do. I think those three programs are kind of in a class by themselves right now. So I am not one of those people who thinks what Clemson did the past few years was only because of Deshaun Watson.
Okay.
I realize they've got some dudes that nobody else has. Like, nobody else has a Christian Wilkins. Nobody else has a Dexter Lawrence. So my guess is Clemson wins that game, But if Auburn hangs in, makes it close, I would watch Auburn very closely the rest of the way.
All right, Andy. Before I let you go, I got about a minute left here. Our poll question today is, who's the most cursed franchise in sports? What do you think is the most cursed college football team, if you had to choose one?
My dad would disown me if I didn't say his alma mater, the South Carolina Gamecocks, home of the chicken curse. No question. I was at a pig picking in 1984 when they went up to Navy undefeated and came back with their feathers between their legs. So
okay.
It's the chicken curse.
All right, Andy. Thanks very much. Appreciate the 2 cents. That's Andy Staples from Sports Illustrated, at Andy_Staples.
The Rich Eisen Show. Weekdays at noon Eastern on radio stations across the country and audience.
If you like that video, be sure to download our app, and I'll be sure to move Week 6 games to Saturday for that wedding you have to go to.